Guys, this is Andrew with SHTF Honey Badger, and today I'm coming to you to talk about what we can see as some flashpoints that I want us to be watching out for in 2023. So I'm going to go down this list today. These are personally the major flashpoints where I could see some sort of more widespread SHTF scenario happening out of, but there definitely could be stuff outside of this list or things that I'm not really touching on too much, so keep that in mind. These are just my opinions and the situations I'm going to be monitoring the most this year. So number one on our list is going to be attacks on U.S. infrastructure. So we did see over the course of 2022 several attacks on U.S. infrastructure. The two most notable, I would say, would be attacks that happened on Christmas Day on the West Coast, and then the attacks that happened in early December on the power grid down in the southeastern United States. So these two particular attacks are a little different than what I personally would have expected to see because they are physical attacks, but they do outline the fact that U.S. infrastructure, particularly things like power grids, are very lightly protected. So it's something that I fear could happen in a lot more catastrophic scale, and it's something that I'm personally going to be watching and being very aware of going into, and especially at least in the beginning of 2023, kind of seeing how this happens, because personally, I do feel those attacks may have been more a preemptive situation or kind of a preamble to some sort of more major situation, because we saw what could happen with just a couple individuals taking actions on an uncoordinated level for the most part. Now, to me, this is something that a larger group that intends to do ill will towards people could take advantage of and see how this is something they could replicate on a higher level. So for me, it's something that I am very concerned about, and this is something that I'm going to be monitoring. The next flashpoint or major situation that I think could lead into some sort of SHTF type scenario in 2023 is going to be a escalation of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, this is something that's been on everybody's radar for, the last year, so it's not anything surprising to be bringing up in this video, but again, we have seen Russia get more desperate. We've seen a lot of stuff come out of Russia, specifically that Putin supposedly is very ill, very close to the end of his life, if the rumors are to be believed. And if that's really the case, and he passes away while this war is ongoing, it's very hard to say who's going to take control. Russia, notoriously throughout history, has had a very bad habit of any time a power vacuum being created, I would say you typically see someone that is much worse than the person who left that power vacuum take over. So, we've seen this several times in Russian history, and this is something that hopefully does not repeat itself, but it's a fear that I would be wary of, because even though Putin has done some stuff that's definitely questionable, definitely is not stuff that I would personally say is a good thing or agreeable, he honestly still has been restrained compared to what some of the people in Russia have wanted him to do that are more higher up in those political parties. If you do listen to a lot of the rhetoric out there from Russia, they would quite frankly have them using nukes in Ukraine right now if some other people, which I would guess, for example, would be Putin, was not being more restrained about this. I know that sounds a little weird to say, but I personally do think from what we've seen over there in this conflict, Putin's basically been the biggest person putting his foot on the brake on stopping this from going into some potentially worse scenarios. So if we do have somebody that does happen to take power in Russia, if Putin passes away here within this year, we could definitely see that escalate into potentially tactical nuclear weapons being employed on the battlefield up to, again, I would say this is very doubtful, but, even strategic nuclear weapons being used on the European continent. So that's the second scenario in the 2023 year that I'm personally going to be monitoring, and that's something I would want you to be thinking about. The third item I want to bring up here is the China-Taiwan conflict. So we all know how, if you've been watching the news anyway, this has been developing in China, Taiwan. So essentially, China's been making more and more provocative moves. This isn't something that's relatively new. We have seen China in the past do this, but the difference is China has gotten to a point where their capability of acting on these threats and doing something more widespread against Taiwan is becoming more of a reality. Now, there are especially military experts out there, and even the Department of Defense within the United States has made predictions that if anything would happen, it would be closer to 2026, 2027. But again, that is just a prediction. That does not mean for a fact that something could not happen this year. And this is something that very much so is going to have effects on us over here in the United States. It would have effects on people over in Europe as well, as a large amount of microchips in particular are produced on Taiwan. I know they are working on moving more of that infrastructure over to the United States, so we should be seeing more domestic capability to produce microchips over here. But the most advanced microchips still are produced on factories that are located in Taiwan, and that's something that would have a major effect on us if they were to have an actual armed conflict happen over there, because that supply would typically be something that we would see be one of the first things to go. The other thing that I could see happening as well due to this is a potentially pseudo, if not full-out military conflict between the United States, Japan, and China. In this type of situation as well, it would be realistically one of the first wars in, several decades where the United States is truly potentially facing a situation where they would be going toe-to-toe with another adversary. You can look back and see how stuff was kind of figured out during the Cold War with strategic planning, but realistically, this would be one of the first wars we've seen in a long time. If it were to occur where the United States would probably be taking heavy losses, we would see, I wouldn't say quite World War II level losses, but we would realistically see the United States losing large amounts of ships, planes, and men on a scale that we haven't seen in several decades. So that is one thing that I want us to really keep an eye on, because if it does go hot, in a worst case scenario, we will see a lot of naval engagements. We would see a large shortage as well of more higher levels of technology. So again, the minor stuff would not be so affected. Things like, for example, plastic injection molding manufacturing, even some metal manufacturing could relatively be brought back into the U.S. relatively quick. But those advanced technology features, especially microchips that you see in a lot of technology, such as this camera I'm recording it on, the smartphone in your pocket, or that car that you're probably driving, all are coming from a place like Taiwan and would heavily be affected by an actual armed conflict over there. The next flashpoint that I want to bring up that I think we need to be paying attention to this year is going to be North Korea. So the one thing that we have seen with North Korea is throughout 2022, specifically since our current administration has gotten into office, we've seen a lot of poking of the bear, so to speak, with North Korea. Regardless of your political beliefs on this, it's just kind of a fact that the previous administration was working towards a more stable relationship with North Korea, and ever since our current administration has taken in, the North Koreans do not like our current administration, and because of that, we have seen a lot more military escalations over there. We've seen them threatening to test nuclear weapons, which we had not seen for the past couple of years before this administration took in. We have seen dozens of tactical short-range nuclear missile tests, and we have seen also, tens, if not into the dozens at this point, ICBM tests, as well as North Korean military forces doing more and more provoking actions along the border, especially in the airspace over the DMZ. So I do think with North Korea there is that potential for a conflict to happen, and it's something that I would really be paying attention to, because if, again, similar to that Taiwan situation, we see this conflict go hot, this is something that's going to have a major impact on us, specifically when it comes to those technologies that you're using, and we're going to see a lot of shortage in more advanced technology, not to mention as well as a lot of manpower getting dragged into it from U.S. forces, because keep in mind, we do have, if I recall, about 40,000 troops stationed in South Korea. Somebody in the comments wants to drop it down there if I am painstakingly off on that number. Let me know. That was the last time I looked it up, but I'm not saying for a fact that that is the most accurate number. But again, that would be a major U.S. military involvement. That would create a major shortage of several items technology-wise. Like, for example, anything that's a Samsung electronic has links to being produced in South Korea for the most part. So again, keep that in mind, as well as this would be another situation if we saw that North Korea conflict go hot. I have no doubt in my mind China would more than likely take advantage of it with Taiwan as well if they see U.S. forces getting tied up on a fight on the peninsula. So that would be my flashpoint there. The next flashpoint that I want to bring up that I could see being a flashpoint in 2023, and this ties into, honestly, every single one of the other ones mentioned so far, would be cyber warfare. So one of the things that actually happened recently was a major technological failure within the FAA's system on aircraft. So the monitoring system that helps direct air traffic control throughout the United States had a major outage that occurred within the last week of me filming this video. Now, this is not supposedly a cyber attack, but I do want to point out this is a system that should have backups, and not to mention those backups should have backups when you think about how vital this system is. So for it to actually fail in the way they are describing it failing, to me, it just seems very unlikely. I do feel like you would have to have some sort of outside actor to have some sort of system failure in the particular way that this did. Now, that's my opinion. I will say there isn't anything being reported that that's actually factual, so definitely take that with a grain of salt. Remember, that's just my opinion on it, but I do think that's one of the many examples of stuff that we have seen happen over the last year where, you know, this could boil into a more larger indicator of cyber warfare happening. Like I've mentioned, we have seen a lot of widespread outages on ISPs, denial of service attacks on government websites and company websites, and a lot of other, you know, smaller attacks like that. But keep in mind, again, those are a lot of times probing attacks, and they're trying to figure out where the weaknesses are in these systems. And you do have actors that once they do find that major weakness, they will exploit it, and that could lead to widespread infrastructure failure, that could lead to widespread monetary failure, it could lead to widespread failure in medical systems. Keep that in mind as, you know, again, we've seen attacks on all types of these systems, just not as wide scale as it could potentially be. So the last item I want to bring up on this list, the last flashpoint that could, that could turn into a more wide-scale SHTF scenario, in my opinion, in 2023 would be, again, some reoccurring food shortages. I know this is a topic that was brought up a lot in 2022. I know I personally brought it up. I know several other channels had brought it up as well. And I do think that we will see more food shortages in 2023. Now, you can look around right now at the time of filming this video, for example. You probably noticed for most of you, you're experiencing shortage on items like eggs. Specifically, eggs are the worst that I've noticed right now. So those shortages are out there, and I do think as well we'll see more of these. Keep in mind, with some of the previous videos, you've probably heard me talk about it, as well as other prepping channels out there talk about the fact that Ukraine and Russia do account for a large portion of the world's grains. And now, while they don't directly affect the United States, for example, it does affect a lot of other countries, and to help them out, we have seen more cutbacks over here, for example, in the United States and Canada, as well as shortages of fertilizer in the United States and Canada, leading to less crop production than what's typically expected. So, you know, there's still a lot of different factors out there that can contribute into food shortages for 2023. Now, again, this isn't something I'm saying, you know, we're going to have the shelves empty tomorrow. You need to panic, but this is something that I do want you guys to really think about and account for, because I would say overall a basic fundamental of prepping is going to be doing your food preps, and if a food shortage happens, be prepared. Because keep in mind, again, too, any of these other scenarios, they're all going to lead to a food shortage. Now, again, this is kind of its own bullet point just because it could be a standalone food shortage. There may not be any of these other contributing factors that have a major play onto seeing a food shortage, but it's completely possible. So that's at least my particular flashpoints I'm currently going to be watching for 2023. So again, you have any that you observed or that you're watching yourself, drop those down in the comments below. We always love to hear from you guys. We love to hear your feedback. We love to hear your opinions on it, and we always do want to try to incorporate that in our videos. So if you have some good points, you have some different topics you want to be covered when it comes to scenarios we should be monitoring in 2023, drop them down below. Let us know. While you're on the way to that comment section, if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button. We'd be glad to see you guys do that. Otherwise, this is Andrew with SHTF Honey Badger. Stay safe and stay prepared.